What would it be like if you had 15 hours every single week just to do whatever you wanted? This sounds absolutely crazy, but it's exactly what happens when you put into practice what I'm going to teach in this video. So in this video, literally, I'm going to walk you through 3 separate sections: reverse planning, what we call PTT, and then the third one is going to be survival shapes, ways that you can manage your days according to how you plan your weeks to maximize the 24 hours. Now, first things first, there is no guarantee of this. However, it is going to make a massive impact. And the 15 extra hours for you, just to do some math, that would be about an extra weekend every single month or an extra month every single year. So as we continue this video, feel free to grab a piece of paper, jump down and jot some notes down. We have an entire planner that goes through these parts plus more that we'd be happy to share with you. But really, I want to share these 3 pieces that allows you to get an extra 15 hours of productivity every single week based on what users are giving us as feedback. So let's dive in. First things first is, when do you plan? First off, the plan itself, that's not really what I value, but the planning itself, it's extremely valuable. One of the biggest mistakes we have with top performers and high performers who are trying to get to the level that we go to, which is optimal performance, is that they don't understand where the value is. Yes, there is value in a plan based on the results that you get. That is important. But the plan itself also has extreme value. Different, but extreme value. So because of that, when we were working with a top level executive at one of the large social media organizations, they brought this reality to me of, hey, we never really focused on the value of the process. We always talk results. And I get that. And I'm a result-based guy. However, the process of planning is where the power is. The results of it are in your execution. But the plan, if it's done well, makes your execution much easier. All right, so let's dive into this. First off, when do you plan? You plan before the event. What I mean by this is, imagine if you were going to run a race and you waited till the gun went off and the race started for you to start tying your shoes. That is a foolish way to start a race, but that's how most of us are starting off our weeks. We are waiting to plan until Monday morning, and then I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do this week. That would be like starting a race after everyone else started the race. Our clients, the optimal performers, what we want to do is we want to be planning before the race starts. So here's what I mean by that. I want you on Friday to close your week out, finish strong, start strong. I want you to close your week out, and I want you to plan the next week. Now, once you plan the next week, then we can start focusing on execution. Now, here's how I want you to plan it. We use an LP planner that has 9 questions we ask ourselves every single week to get our head straight. But the focus of it is this concept of reverse planning. Most people, the way they plan is they make a list, they do a list. They make a list, they do a list. And they make a list and they do a list. The problem is they might make the list, but most people don't do the list. They make a list, they pick the 2 things they want to do, and then they get annoyed because, ran out of time. What I want you to do is I want you to not just make a list, but I want you to make a plan. What is the difference between a list and a plan? A plan has strategy. A list has items. That's it. So if you think you're a planner, but you're just making a to-do list, that is not planning. That's making a list. It's better than the majority of people who just kind of go with the flow, but it's not actually planning. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to focus on, what is it I want this week? What are the things that really bring me joy and bring me fulfillment? What would I like to see in this? In order to do this, I usually ask 3 questions. What am I focused on this week? What am I grateful for this week? And what am I working towards this week? Now, when I talk about what I'm working towards, there's 4 vital signs that we work on that we'll go into in another video. But what really brings fulfillment to you? If it happened this week, what would that look like? That's the first part. That's what you want to do. Then we jump into what you need to do or what you have committed to do. That's your to-do list. It's just part of the actual strategy. So once you have what you want to do, then you have what you need to do. The key is we only do what is actually important. Now, when we define the word important, we define it as what actually is related to a goal of yours. I found when you use the word important, you're going to get subjective answers based on who thinks what's more important than another. If you don't believe me, try planning with your significant other and start using the term what's important, what's not important. You will find an argument very, very quickly. Work with your business partner. What's important, what's not important. No, what's related to a goal, what is not related to a goal. That is an objective place you can focus on. Urgency is based on what needs to happen that day. Okay, so you're looking at your to-do list. You have the things that you want to do. You're looking at your to-do list, and now you're trying to prioritize what you should do first. In order to do this, you're going to go through and actually do what we call the survival shapes. So 3 things. Number 1, when do you plan before you have to start? How do you plan? Reverse planning, right? What you want to do, what you need to do, then what's important. And now what we're getting into is how do you actually execute the plan, which is what we call with survival shapes. But before you can execute a day, you got to go back to that first one, which is when do you plan before the race starts? So here's what I want you to do. I call this PTT, plan tomorrow today. Just like you're going to start the week on Friday, just like you're not going to wait for the race to start to tie your shoe, you're going to plan the day before the day starts. If you are starting your day with planning, you are left behind by the runners who have already started. So PTT, plan tomorrow today. You're going to sit down. It takes probably 5 minutes to just go, all right, based on my to-do list, based on what it is I want, what needs to happen tomorrow? And we break it down, like I said, based on urgency, meaning it has to happen that day, or non-urgent, meaning it can happen another day. And then we place it on relation to goal. If it's related to a goal, then it's going to be higher weighted in our priority. And if it's not related to a goal, it's going to be weighted lower in our priority. And if you think about it, it's like the time matrix, which if you've ever read Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you've seen this. However, he's not the one who started it. Dwight Eisenhower actually is the one who is credited for using this in a way to delegate. But it's also a way to prioritize. And it's based on urgency. And what Eisenhower did was importance. But again, importance has become subjective. And when you're planning with yourself to maximize the life you're living and get those extra 15 hours of productivity, you are going to be subjective. And when humans are subjective, we tend to cheat. To avoid that, we want to focus on what is objective and not subjective, which is why we use the urgent in relation to goal. So you take that list and you plan out tomorrow today, meaning the night before you're planning it. And then you're going to actually have these quadrants based on these 4 categories: urgency, relation to goal. If a task is urgent, meaning it has to happen on that day, the day you're planning for, you can put that, if you had like a XY axis and you had a top left quadrant, that would be urgent. You put it up there in the urgent because it has to happen that day. Left side is urgent, right side is not urgent. If you have the y-axis, which is going to be based on the relation to a goal, above the horizontal line is going to be related to a goal. Below the horizontal line is going to be not related to a goal. And you can see why, if it's urgent, meaning it has to happen tomorrow, and it's related to a goal, it should have a higher priority than something that is not urgent and not related to a goal. Does that make sense? Now, as we navigate through this, again, you could do it as an XY axis. You could do it by just labeling what it is. But the tasks that are urgent, this is not subjective. This is not what you want to do. This is what has to happen in an objective stance tomorrow, the day you're planning for. Now, what do you do once you have your list of things that need to get done? This is where the concept of survival shapes come in. The average human can only do 7 meaningful tasks a day. Now, if you're sitting here going, oh my goodness, I have so much more than 7. I get it. That's why we have survival shapes. And when we were working with top level professionals in the military industry, one of them was a survivalist specialist. And I said, how do you survive if I'm stranded? I was just interested. And what he said, you know what you need to do? There's 4 things you need to find. He said, number 1, and I said, water. He said, wrong. He said, shelter. He said, the first thing you have to find is shelter. The second thing you find is water. The third thing you find is food. And I looked at him and he stopped there. I said, well, what's the 4th? And he said, hey, at that point, you kind of just stand still. He said, because there's a better chance of the United States military finding you than you finding us. And I thought it was kind of like he was saying that, tongue in cheek, but he was very serious. And he doubled down when he said, we always find the camp, but we don't always find the camper. So I took that and I went, okay, how do I apply that? Because I do feel at times that my days I'm surviving. And in order to get an extra 15 hours of productivity, to be able to do what it is that I feel called to do, I need to make sure I'm able to survive some of these days where I have more than 7 tasks to do. Some of these days where I have tons of tasks to do. How do I choose which one to go after first? And that's where the survival shapes came in. The fact that the average person can only do 7 meaningful tasks a day, we broke it up into 7 options, 3 shapes, right? So number 1, you circle the one task that you have to get done. No matter what, you have to do. Our daughter, Natalie, has a medical condition. If you know anything about us or you follow us, and Natalie, when she gets sick, she spends time in the hospital. And when she spends time in the hospital, it kind of throws off our day and our week and sometimes a month. But because of that, there's times where I know what needs to get done and doesn't need to get done. Let me give you a less extreme example. If I'm traveling to go give a keynote or workshop with a client and all of a sudden my plane is delayed, because I know what the order of operation is, if you want to call it that, of my day, I know where to go next and I don't have to think. I can just execute. So here's what happens. Circle 1, that's the shelter. What's the one thing that has to happen? The next thing you're going to do is you're going to put a square around the next 3. That's the water. That's what you need to find next. What are the next 3 that have to get done? And then I want you to put a triangle around the next 3. That right there is 7 tasks. 1 + 3 + 3 = 7. Those are the tasks that you must accomplish in that day. Now, here's what we did. We started with when we planned before the week starts. We started with what the concept of planning was, reverse planning. What you want to do, what you need to do, what's important. We then took what you want to do and what you said you need to do, and we put it into quadrants based on its relationship to urgency of it having to happen that day and its relationships to the goals that we have set. Now what we did is we put together the survival shapes, the 7 options, 1 circle, 3 squares, 3 triangles, to get you where you know how to execute. The final thing I do is I will underline whatever tasks are on there that can be done in 15 minutes or less. Right? Maybe even 20 minutes. That's what I call a push task. It's a simple task that doesn't need to get done every single day, but it can get done in 20 minutes or less. I want you to underline them, because when you get to a meeting 15 minutes early or someone doesn't show up and they're 20 minutes late, you can actually use that time to execute on what needs to be done. Now, why do we do it like this? It's because we want to make sure we are planning and executing, but we're not doing it at the same time. The most dangerous thing you could do is plan when you should be executing and execute when you should be planning. It's a mistake people make all the time, and it is extremely detrimental. So right now, if you take what we did, you have it on a piece of paper, whether you use our planner or not, which again, you can, but just the philosophy and the system behind it, these few parts that are just a piece of what we do with our full planning system, will walk you through exactly how to get that extra 15 hours every single week. So here's what I challenge you to do. Take this information and try it. Take the information, and before the week starts, I want you to plan your week just like you would tie your shoes before a race started. What I also want you to do is I want you to realize the fact that you have a desire to cheat your little list. And if you have a plan without a strategy, that ain't a plan. It's just a list, right? The difference between a plan and a list is a plan has strategy and a list has items. I also want you to realize why it's so important to do reverse planning. What you want to do, what you need to do, what's actually important. Finally, comparing to urgency and relation to goal. And then the final piece of it, what we did was put the survival shapes on it, because you don't want to plan when you should execute and execute when you should plan. The final piece is understanding that we call this the 80-20 principle of planning. 80% of your life you can plan, 20% you cannot. However, if you don't take care of the 80, the 20 will feel like 100. That's where overwhelm comes in. One of the most amazing things is when my daughter, Natalie, if she ever gets sick, I'm amazed that the severity of her sickness is not what dictates the challenge we have of what it disrupts our life with. If my daughter gets sick and my wife and I have 80% of our life figured out, we can handle the trip regardless of whether it's a life and death situation or it's a common cold. However, if we don't have the 80 figured out, that little disruption that we've dealt with over the last 10 years of her being alive becomes a massive disruption. So the question I have for you is, do you want those 15 hours? And in order to get that 15 hours of productivity, are you willing to give me 20? 20 minutes to plan your week, 5 minutes to actually plan your next day, and walking through that plan like you should, allowing yourself to execute, is going to get you exactly where you need to go. Life doesn't need to be as hard as we make it. However, when we're stuck at this high level mentality and not focusing on the optimal level of performance, you will always be chasing and you'll never experience enough. And that's not a life worth living.